Picture this, a bustling city alive with the sounds of market traders, the laughter of children, and the hum of daily life, a place where art, science, and culture flourish under the sun. Now imagine that very same city, silent and still, buried under layer upon layer of sand, forgotten by time, waiting patiently for its story to be told once more. This isn't a work of fiction. All across our world, from the vast Sahara to the rugged dunes of Arabia, real civilizations have risen, thrived, and then vanished, swallowed whole by the shifting deserts that once sustained them. What if I told you that beneath those sweeping sands lie entire kingdoms, hidden dynasties that mastered survival in some of the harshest environments on Earth? These were places of breathtaking innovation, where ancient engineers designed revolutionary water systems, where traders moved precious goods across deadly terrain, and where cultures blossomed in the unlikeliest of settings. Yet, in the blink of geological time, they were gone, erased from memory, concealed by nature's slow but unstoppable hand. Today, we're setting out on a journey to uncover these lost worlds. We'll explore how deserts, far from being empty wastelands, act as both destroyers and preservers of history. We'll walk in the footsteps of archaeologists who have unearthed stunning artifacts and entire cities frozen in time. From the Silk Road's buried metropolises to the mysterious fall of the Garamantes in the Sahara, each discovery rewrites what we thought we knew about human adaptability, ambition, and fragility. And perhaps most importantly, we'll see how the lessons from these sand-buried societies resonate powerfully today as we face our own changing climate and environmental challenges. So settle in, you're about to discover stories of resilience, mystery, and wonder that have lain hidden for centuries, just waiting for their chance to be heard again. Deserts are often imagined as timeless, empty expanses, unchanging seas of sand under a relentless sun. But nothing could be further from the truth. These landscapes are actually among the most dynamic and powerful on our planet, constantly reshaped by invisible forces. The primary architect of this change is the wind, which acts like a master sculptor, picking up fine grains of sand and carrying them across vast distances. Over centuries, this process can cause entire dune fields to migrate, slowly and silently consuming everything in their path. A city left abandoned for a few generations could find itself completely entombed, its tallest structures buried under meters of sediment, hidden from the world as if it never existed. But wind is only part of the story. Water, or often the devastating lack of it, plays an equally crucial role. Deserts are defined by their extreme aridity, but they are not immune to climate cycles. Periods of prolonged drought can desiccate the land, killing vegetation that holds the soil together and making it vulnerable to erosion. Conversely, when rare, intense rains do arrive, they can be incredibly destructive. Flash floods carve new channels through the earth, washing away the fragile surface and sometimes revealing long-buried secrets, only to cover them again later. This push and pull between drought and deluge constantly reworks the desert floor. The most fascinating aspect of this dynamic environment is its unique power to preserve. While the shifting sands bury cities and monuments, they also create a remarkable time capsule. The very same sand that hides a civilization also protects it. In arid conditions with low moisture and stable temperatures, organic materials that would normally rot away in other climates, things like wooden tools, textiles, ancient scrolls, and even food remains, can survive for millennia. The sand acts as a perfect insulator, sealing these artifacts in a state of suspended animation. This is why archaeologists can unhold a wooden statue from a desert tomb that looks as if it was carved yesterday, or find a basket of fruit that is thousands of years old yet still recognizable. This natural process of concealment and preservation helps explain one of history's greatest puzzles. How could a thriving, sophisticated society simply vanish without a trace? The answer lies in the desert's patient, relentless movement. A civilization might collapse due to a combination of factors: a shift in trade routes, a prolonged drought, or political unrest. Once its population disperses and maintenance ceases, the desert wastes no time in reclaiming its territory. Within a few decades, buildings are filled with sand. Within centuries, they are buried hills. To the outside world, that culture is lost, its memory fading into legend. Yet, all the while, its story is waiting intact beneath the surface, patiently awaiting a future generation with the curiosity and technology to uncover it. This delicate dance between human settlement and the desert's inevitable advance shows us that our history is not just written in books, but is literally layered into the very earth beneath our feet. Now, let's travel east to one of the most famous and romanticized networks in human history, the Silk Road. But we're not talking about the well-known caravan routes. We're going deep into the heart of the Taklamakan Desert, a place so formidable that its very name is said to translate to place of no return. Here, nestled along the treacherous paths between China and the Mediterranean, flourished incredible oasis cities that became the beating heart of global trade for centuries. Imagine a traveler, exhausted from weeks of journeying under a blistering sun, finally spotting the lush green of an oasis on the horizon. That sight wasn't just a relief, it was the gateway to a cosmopolitan world. Cities like Lulan and Nia were more than just pit stops. They were vibrant, international hubs where a Roman merchant could barter with a Chinese official over silk, while a Buddhist monk from India discussed philosophy with a Persian artisan. These were melting pots of culture, language, and innovation, all made possible by the life-giving water that allowed them to bloom in the desert's midst. The level of preservation in these buried cities is nothing short of miraculous, offering us a window into a world frozen in time. When archaeologists began excavating sites like Nia, they didn't just find crumbling walls, they discovered entire households frozen in a moment. A wooden loom with half-finished fabric still threaded, waiting for a weaver who never returned. Documents written on wooden tablets and leather in a long-dead language called Kharosthi, detailing everything from legal disputes over a camel to love letters, giving voices to people whose lives were suddenly interrupted. Perhaps one of the most poignant finds was the so-called Nia Beauty, the remarkably preserved mummy of a young woman with elegant features, high cheekbones, and long hair, dressed in fine woolen clothing. She wasn't alone. Entire cemeteries have revealed a diverse population, with genetic links stretching from Western Europe to East Asia, proving just how interconnected this ancient world truly was. These weren't isolated outposts, they were the cosmopolitan centers of their day. Yet, for all their ingenuity and international flair, these cities were profoundly vulnerable, living on a knife's edge ecologically. Their existence was entirely dependent on rivers flowing from the distant meltwater of mountain glaciers. When the climate began to shift, as it has done countless times throughout history, those lifelines started to fail. Studies of ancient climate date to suggest a period of intensified desertification, where temperatures may have risen and precipitation patterns changed. The glaciers feeding the rivers retreated and the water flow dwindled. The sand dunes, always waiting at the city limits, began their slow, inexorable advance. Without enough water to maintain the irrigation canals that fed their fields and filled their reservoirs, the people of Lulan and Nia faced an impossible choice. They couldn't fight the desert anymore, so they gathered what they could carry and abandoned their homes, leaving behind a silent city that the sand was all too eager to reclaim, layer by layer, until only the ghosts and the buried treasures remained. The story of the Silk Road's lost cities is a powerful lesson in interdependence. Their incredible wealth and cultural richness were directly tied to the flow of goods and ideas across continents, but their very survival was tethered to the delicate and unpredictable balance of their local environment. They remind us that a network of trade, no matter how vast and powerful, is not immune to the forces of nature. A shift in the climate, a change in the wind, and the most prosperous hub can become a ghost town, its story whispered only by the sands until we come along to listen. This intricate dance between human ambition and environmental reality is a theme that echoes from the past straight into our present. From the shifting sands of the Silk Road, we journey now to a city hewn not from clay or brick, but from the very living rock itself. Nestled within a remote desert canyon in modern-day Jordan, Petra emerges like a mirage, its iconic treasury facade glowing with a breathtaking rose-red hue that seems to capture the very essence of the desert sunset. This was no ordinary settlement. It was the spectacular capital of the Nabatean kingdom, a nomadic Arab people who transformed themselves into masters of commerce and engineering. What makes Petra so astonishing is not just its beauty, but its location, a secret stronghold hidden behind a narrow, winding gorge called the Sick, a natural fortification that made the city nearly impregnable. For centuries, this hidden capital thrived in the heart of the desert, a testament to a civilization that didn't just survive in a harsh world, but learned to dominate it. The lifeblood of Petra, quite literally, was water. In a region where rainfall was scarce and unpredictable, the Nabateans performed what can only be described as hydrological magic. They were brilliant hydraulic engineers, constructing a vast and complex network to control every precious drop. They carved intricate channels into the cliff sides to capture water from miles away, built massive dams to control destructive flash floods, and designed a system of terracotta pipes and cisterns that could hold millions of gallons. This water system was so advanced that it not only supported a population of perhaps 30,000 people, but also created lush gardens and public fountains, a shocking display of luxury in the middle of the arid desert. This mastery over water was the foundation of their power, allowing them to offer respite and resources to the caravans that were the source of their immense wealth. And what wealth it was! Petra sat at the crossroads of major trade routes, a vital nexus for the exchange of luxury goods between the Mediterranean world and the East. Frankincense and myrrh from Arabia, silks from China, spices from India all flowed through the city's markets. The Nabateans grew immensely rich by taxing this trade, and they poured that fortune into carving a metropolis of unparalleled grandeur directly into the multicolored sandstone cliffs. The famous treasury, with its ornate Greek-inspired columns and statues, was likely a royal tomb or temple. Beyond it lies a sprawling city of tombs, temples, theaters, and homes, all sculpted from the rock face. Each structure was a declaration of power, culture, and artistic achievement, showcasing a unique blend of Hellenistic, Egyptian, and Mesopotamian influences absorbed from the traders who passed through their gates. Yet, for all its grandeur and ingenuity, Petra's glory was not destined to last forever. Its decline was a slow unraveling caused by a combination of shifting economics and devastating natural forces. The rise of sea-based trade routes under the Roman Empire began to bypass the overland caravan roads, slowly choking off the city's economic lifeblood. Then, a series of powerful earthquakes struck, with a particularly catastrophic one in the year 363, causing severe damage to the city's vital water management system and many of its buildings. Without the wealth from trade to fund massive repairs, and with their sophisticated infrastructure in ruins, the Nabateans could no longer sustain their desert paradise. People gradually moved away, seeking opportunities elsewhere, and the great city was left to the elements. Over the centuries, the desert did what it does so well: it hid its secret. Sand dunes drifted into the once bustling streets, and wind erosion smoothed the details of magnificent carvings. Petra faded from the memory of the Western world, existing only in local Bedouin legends. That is, until the early 19th century, when Swiss explorer Johann Ludwig Burckhardt, having heard whispers of a lost city, disguised himself and convinced a local guide to lead him through the sick. The moment he laid eyes on the treasury facade, he knew he had found something extraordinary. His accounts sparked a new era of exploration, and archaeologists have been meticulously uncovering Petra's secrets ever since, revealing a society of incredible sophistication, whose greatest innovation, turning a water-scarce desert into a thriving oasis, ultimately could not save it from the unstoppable forces of change. While Petra's story unfolded in the rock canyons of Jordan, another extraordinary civilization was achieving something even more improbable: building a powerful empire in the very center of the Sahara, the most forbidding desert on Earth. The Garamantes, a people often dismissed in ancient Roman texts as mere nomadic troublemakers, were in fact the masters of a sophisticated kingdom that flourished in what is now modern Libya. For over 1,000 years, they turned one of the most extreme environments on the planet into a hub of agriculture, trade, and culture, completely upending our modern perception of the Sahara as an empty, uninhabitable void. Their capital, Garama, stood as a bustling urban center where the echoes of a forgotten greatness were slowly silenced by the encroaching sands. The secret to their success lay beneath their feet in a revolutionary invention known as the Fagara. These were not simple wells, but vast underground irrigation networks, tunnels dug deep into the earth to tap into ancient fossil water aquifers that had been locked away for millennia. The Garamantes engineered these channels with a gentle, consistent slope, allowing water to flow for miles entirely by gravity, emerging at the surface to feed lush oasis gardens in the blistering heat. This wasn't just a minor farming project, it was a large-scale agricultural transformation that supported a population estimated at up to 100,000 people at its peak. They cultivated grapes, figs, olives, and wheat, creating a verdant paradise in the middle of nowhere, a testament to human ingenuity that turned a barren landscape into a breadbasket. This agricultural wealth fueled their rise as a major political and economic force. The Garamantes controlled the early trans-Saharan trade routes, acting as the critical middlemen between the Mediterranean world and sub-Saharan Africa. Camel caravans laden with gold, ivory, and exotic animals from the south would arrive at their cities, exchanging these treasures for Roman glassware, olive oil, and manufactured goods from the north. Their influence was so significant that they engaged in both conflict and diplomacy with the Roman Empire, at times being a thorn in its side and at other times being recognized as a regional power. Archaeological evidence from their tombs and settlements reveals a society with distinct social stratification, led by a king and a class of wealthy elites who lived in multi-story mud-brick houses and were buried with rich grave goods, including imported Roman pottery and jewelry. Yet, the very innovation that built their empire also contained the seeds of its downfall. The Fagara systems were a masterpiece of engineering, but they relied on a finite resource, ancient groundwater that was not being replenished at the rate it was being consumed. Centuries of relentless extraction slowly drained these underground reserves. Compounding this human-made problem was a natural climatic shift towards increased aridity. a gradual drying of the Sahara that made surface water even scarcer and placed greater strain on their subterranean sources. The maintenance of the vast Fagara networks became increasingly difficult as water levels dropped and tunnels collapsed, requiring more effort for diminishing returns. The decline was not a sudden collapse but a slow, grinding retreat. As the water failed, the agricultural base that supported the population and the trade economy shrank. People began to abandon the outlying settlements, retreating towards the core areas around the capital. Eventually, even Garama itself could not be sustained. The sophisticated state apparatus faded, and the great engineering projects were left to silt up and be forgotten. Over the centuries, the relentless Saharan winds did their work, burying the remnants of towns, forts, and farms under dunes, erasing the Garamantes from view and nearly from history, leaving behind only enigmatic mentions in the accounts of their rivals. For centuries, the full scale of their achievement remained hidden, known only from scattered references in Roman texts. The true rediscovery of the Garamantes is a story of modern technology. Satellite imagery and aerial photography have been revolutionary, revealing the ghostly outlines of hundreds of settlements, forts, and, most importantly, the extensive lines of the Fagara systems crisscrossing the desert like ancient scars. Ground excavations have since confirmed these findings, unearthing the complex urban layout of Garama, their elaborate tombs, and artifacts that speak of a rich and complex culture. This evidence paints a picture of a society that was far from a peripheral nuisance to Rome. It was a mirror civilization, a parallel empire that mastered the desert in ways the Romans never could. The story of the Garamantes is ultimately a powerful and timeless cautionary tale. It shows us that no matter how brilliant our technology, the unsustainable use of a critical resource, especially water, can lead even the most advanced and adaptable societies to fade back into the very landscape they once conquered. South of the mighty Egyptian Empire, along the winding course of the Nile, another power was rising from the sun-baked soil of Nubia. This was the Kingdom of Cush, a civilization that would not only rival its northern neighbor but for a time would actually conquer and rule it. For centuries, the narrative of this region has been dominated by the pharaohs, but the story of Cush is one of extraordinary resilience, cultural sophistication, and a complex relationship with the ever-encroaching desert that would both conceal and protect its legacy. Their history is a fascinating pendulum swing of power. Initially influenced by Egypt, they would eventually forge a distinct identity, and under the rule of the so-called Black Pharaohs of the 25th dynasty, they reversed the flow of history, marching north to seize control of the entire Nile Valley. This was the pinnacle of Kushite power, a testament to their military might and political ambition, establishing a reign that would leave an indelible mark on the monuments of Egypt itself. The most striking and iconic remnants of this great kingdom are not found in Egypt, however, but scattered across the arid landscapes of modern-day Sudan. At the royal cemeteries of Maroi, a breathtaking sight unfolds. Not a handful, but over 200 pyramids rise from the desert sands. They are distinctly Kushite in design, taller, narrower, and with steeper sides than their Egyptian counterparts, built not of massive stone blocks but of sandstone and rubble, and often featuring a small temple or offering chapel at their base. What makes them truly exceptional, however, is their artistry. The walls of these chapels and the associated temples are adorned with intricate carvings and hieroglyphs that tell a rich story. They depict powerful kings and queens, often shown in the act of smiting their enemies or making offerings to the gods. Their regalia, a unique blend of Egyptian style and distinctly African elements, lion motifs, headdresses adorned with cobras, and jewelry of exquisite craftsmanship. These carvings are a library in stone, detailing a pantheon of gods where ancient Egyptian deities like Ammon were worshipped alongside purely Kushite gods like the lion-headed Apedemak, revealing a culture that was both absorptive and fiercely independent. For centuries, the story of Kush was quite literally being buried. While not entirely swallowed by dunes like cities in the Sahara, the relentless process of desertification played a crucial role in obscuring its cities and sacred sites. In regions like Nubia, shifting sand dunes slowly encroached upon the bases of temples, filled the courtyards of palaces, and drifted against the steep sides of the pyramids, partially obscuring them and making the vast urban centers like Marare appear as little more than isolated hills in a sea of sand. This slow-motion burial, while hiding the kingdom's full grandeur from the world, acted as a remarkable preservative. The dry, sandy environment protected fragile artifacts from the eroding effects of moisture and wind. It sealed tombs, helping to guard them against the ravages of time and, to some extent, looters, allowing for the incredible preservation of organic materials that would have decayed anywhere else. Modern archaeology has been the key to pulling back this sandy veil. Excavations have revealed that Marare was far more than a necropolis. It was a sprawling, advanced capital city. Archaeologists have uncovered the remains of massive iron smelting furnaces, suggesting Kush was a major center of industrial innovation in ancient Africa. They've found vast royal baths, elaborate palaces with throne rooms, and temples whose walls were once brightly painted. Each discovery adds a new layer to our understanding of their daily life, their economy based on trade in gold, ivory, and ebony, and their complex social structure. The Kushites were master adapters, developing sophisticated water management systems like the Sakia water wheel to irrigate their crops and sustain their population in an increasingly arid environment. Their ability to thrive for so long in such a challenging landscape is a story of human ingenuity in the face of environmental pressure. Ultimately, the decline of Kush was likely brought on by a combination of these external pressures and internal shifts. The continued desertification would have strained their agricultural resources, while the rise of new powers like the Kingdom of Axum to the east disrupted their lucrative trade networks. The world was changing around them, and even their famed adaptability had its limits. The uncovering of Kush is more than just an archaeological endeavor. It is a crucial act of historical rebalancing. For too long, the grandeur of African civilizations was filtered solely through the lens of Egypt. The Kingdom of Kush forces us to widen our view, to appreciate the incredible diversity and power of ancient African societies that built their own empires, developed their own technologies, and created their own stunning art, all while negotiating a fragile existence with the desert that now, finally, is beginning to give up their secrets. But the Sahara holds an even deeper secret, one that completely upends our image of this vast desert. If we could rewind the clock by just 5,000 or 6,000 years, the view from space would be utterly unrecognizable. The sea of yellow and orange that defines North Africa today would instead be a sprawling tapestry of green. This was the Green Sahara, also known as the African Humid Period, an era when this now barren landscape was a verdant paradise. It wasn't just a slightly wetter place, it was a fundamentally different world. Where towering sand dunes now stand, there were instead vast grasslands, shimmering freshwater lakes, and meandering rivers teeming with life. This wasn't a mere niche environment. It was a thriving ecosystem that supported a stunning array of animals we now associate entirely with the African savanna. Elephants, giraffes, hippos, and antelope all roamed where only the hardiest camels can survive today. The most vivid and beautiful evidence of this lost world comes not from buried bones but from art, scattered across the Sahara, particularly in areas like the Tassili Ennaja Plateau in Algeria, are thousands upon thousands of ancient rock paintings and engravings. These aren't just simple stick figures, they are detailed, vibrant, and breathtakingly realistic depictions of the world as those early artists saw it. The walls of caves and rock shelters are adorned with images of cattle herders tending to their prized, long-horned herds, of hunters pursuing magnificent wildlife, and of communities engaged in dance and daily life. This incredible gallery, left by pastoralist societies, shows us a Sahara that was not a place to be feared or quickly traversed, but a home, a land of abundance and cultural richness. These paintings are a direct message from the past, a postcard from a world we can scarcely imagine existing in that location. So, what happened? How does a continent-spanning grassland transform into the largest hot desert on Earth? The answer lies not in the land itself, but in the sky. Paleoclimatologists, scientists who study ancient climates, have pieced this puzzle together using ingenious methods. By extracting deep sediment cores from the bottom of ancient Saharan lake beds and from the ocean floor off the coast of Africa, they can analyze layers of dust and pollen that have accumulated over millennia. These layers tell a precise story. The amount of desert dust blown out over the Atlantic was far lower during the Green Period, indicating more vegetation was holding the soil in place. The pollen grains preserved in these sediments show a shift from grasses and trees to the sparse, drought-resistant plants of the desert. The primary driver of this dramatic change was a slow, natural wobble in Earth's orbit around the Sun, known as orbital forcing. This wobble gradually altered the amount of solar energy reaching different parts of the planet, which in turn shifted the monsoon patterns that brought life-giving rains to the Sahara. As the monsoons weakened and retreated southward, the rains failed. The grasslands began to wither, the lakes and rivers started to evaporate, and the vast sand sheets beneath the soil were exposed. The process wasn't a single, catastrophic event, but a relentless, centuries-long drying trend that fundamentally reshaped the continent and forced every living thing within it to make a choice: adapt, migrate, or face extinction. The human response to this ecological catastrophe is a profound story of resilience. The pastoralist societies depicted in the rock art, whose entire culture and survival were built around their cattle, had to make impossible decisions. Some communities likely followed the retreating rains southward, becoming part of the populations that would later establish great civilizations in West Africa. Others may have moved towards the Nile Valley, bringing their knowledge of animal husbandry and perhaps contributing to the rise of dynastic Egypt. Those who remained in the increasingly arid landscape had to transform their entire way of life, likely shifting to a more nomadic existence and relying on hardy animals like goats and later camels. Their world was literally turning to dust around them, and their story is a powerful testament to human flexibility in the face of overwhelming environmental change. The transformation of the Sahara from a green haven to a sandy desert is one of the most dramatic examples of natural climate change in our planet's recent history. And it holds a sobering mirror up to our modern predicament. While the original greening and subsequent desertification were caused by natural cycles, the scale and speed of the change show us how fragile a seemingly stable ecosystem can be. It demonstrates the profound interconnectedness of climate, vegetation, and human society. Today, we are not facing a slow orbital wobble, but a rapid human-induced shift in our climate. The lessons from the Green Sahara are clear. When the environment upon which a civilization depends undergoes a radical transformation, that civilization must change beyond recognition or risk collapsing entirely. The sands that buried that lush world are a silent reminder that the ground beneath our feet and the climate that sustains it is far more dynamic and powerful than we often assume. But how do we actually find these lost cities? How do we peel back the layers of sand and time to hear the whispers of those who lived there? The answer lies in the meticulous, often grueling work of archaeology, a field that has been utterly transformed from the days of treasure hunters and lone explorers with shovels. Today's desert archaeologist is part detective, part scientist, and part technological wizard, armed with an array of tools that would seem like science fiction to their predecessors. Before a single grain of sand is ever moved, the search begins from the sky. Satellite imagery and aerial photography can reveal the ghostly outlines of ancient walls, roads, and irrigation canals that are completely invisible from the ground. Even more advanced LiDAR technology, which uses laser pulses to map the ground surface, can digitally strip away vegetation and sand to create a three-dimensional map of the terrain beneath, exposing the footprints of entire cities that have been lost for millennia. This non-invasive approach allows researchers to pinpoint exactly where to dig, preserving the fragile site and saving countless hours of fruitless labor. Once a promising site is identified, the real challenge begins. Excavating in a desert is a race against time and the elements. An artifact that has been perfectly preserved for centuries in the dry, stable environment of its sandy tomb can begin to deteriorate the moment it's exposed to sunlight, wind, or even a slight change in humidity. A piece of ancient wood can warp and crack within hours. Delicate textiles can turn to dust if handled incorrectly. That's why archaeologists work with the precision of surgeons, using tiny brushes, dental picks, and even porcupine quills to carefully uncover objects. Every fragment, no matter how small, is meticulously documented, photographed, and its exact location recorded. This context is everything. A beautiful pot is just a nice object, but a pot found next to a hearth with residue of ancient food inside tells a vivid story about daily life, diet, and domestic routines. The real magic happens after the excavation, in the labs where science takes over to decode the secrets of these objects. One of the most powerful tools is radiocarbon dating, which measures the decay of a radioactive isotope in organic material like wood, bone, or seeds. This allows scientists to determine with remarkable accuracy when that plant was harvested or that animal died, providing a solid chronological anchor for the entire layer of the site. Another fundamental technique is stratigraphy, the simple but powerful idea that deeper layers of soil are older than those above them. By carefully reading this vertical sequence of layers like pages in a book, archaeologists can reconstruct the history of a site, seeing how a simple village might have grown into a grand city, or how it might have been rebuilt after a catastrophic earthquake. But the story isn't just told by grand discoveries, it's in the mundane details. A humble pottery shard can reveal trade routes if its clay composition is traced to a source hundreds of miles away. The bones from a garbage pit can tell us what people ate and what diseases they suffered from. Seeds found in a storage room can indicate what crops were cultivated and what the climate was like. Even the microscopic analysis of dental calculus, the plaque on ancient teeth, can reveal information about diet and illness. Each of these tiny clues is a piece of the puzzle, and archaeologists are the patient problem solvers who fit them together, gradually building a narrative from silence and dust. The goal is no longer just to find spectacular gold masks or royal tombs, though those captures the public imagination. The modern mission is to understand the people themselves, the farmers, the merchants, the artisans, the children. What did they believe in? How did they organize their society? How did they adapt to their changing environment? The painstaking work in the desert sun and the quiet analysis in the laboratory are all in service of answering these human questions. It's a slow, methodical process of reconnection, allowing us to meet these lost cultures not as mythical figures from a legend, but as real people whose successes, failures, and ingenuity have directly shaped the world we live in today. Every brushstroke that reveals an ancient inscription, every satellite image that outlines a forgotten street, brings us one step closer to reclaiming these hidden dynasties from the oblivion of the sand. While nature has always held the ultimate power to reshape our planet's landscapes, human hands have often unknowingly helped it along, accelerating processes that would otherwise take centuries. The story of historical desertification is not a simple one of nature's whims. It is a complex dance between immense, impersonal planetary cycles and the very tangible consequences of our own actions. For much of Earth's history, the primary drivers of climate shifts have been these grand, celestial rhythms, changes in the planet's orbit and tilt, known as Milankovitch cycles, gradually alter how and where sunlight strikes the Earth, which can dramatically shift monsoon patterns and temperature regimes over thousands of years. A slight wobble in our axis or a change in our elliptical path around the sun might mean that rains that once reliably nourished a fertile region begin to fail, season after season, decade after decade. This is the slow, powerful drumbeat of natural climate change to which all life must eventually adapt. Yet, time and again, archaeological evidence reveals that ancient societies often played a supporting role in their own demise, inadvertently turning a challenging climatic shift into an outright catastrophe through their own unsustainable practices. In ancient Mesopotamia, often called the cradle of civilization, brilliant irrigation systems turned the desert between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers into the fertile fields that supported burgeoning cities like and Uruk. But there was a hidden flaw in their ingenuity. Under the fierce sun, irrigation water evaporates quickly, leaving behind dissolved salts that accumulate in the soil with every flooding. Over centuries, this salinization slowly poisoned the land, turning it barren and white. Cuneiform tablets from the time even lament the declining yields of wheat, eventually forcing a switch to more salt-tolerant barley. Here, a natural process of mineral buildup was dramatically accelerated by human engineering, fundamentally degrading the very resource their society was built upon. A similar story unfolded a world away in the arid mesas of the American Southwest. The ancestral Puebloans, sometimes called the Anasazi, constructed magnificent cliff dwellings at places like Mesa Verde, a testament to their architectural skill and complex society. Their downfall, however, appears to be a stark lesson in pushing an environment beyond its limits. Analysis of tree rings shows a prolonged, severe drought in the late 13th century, a period of profound water stress. But evidence also suggests that by this time, the local environment was already severely compromised. Centuries of intensive farming, coupled with deforestation to procure timber for construction and fuel, had stripped the landscape of its natural vegetation. This deforestation would have led to increased soil erosion, reducing the land's ability to retain what little moisture did fall from the sky. When the Great Drought hit, a resilient ecosystem might have been able to buffer the blow, but a weakened one collapsed, and with it, the society it supported. The people were forced to abandon their magnificent homes in a great migration, leaving behind empty stone cities for the desert to reclaim. These ancient cautionary tales resonate with an uncomfortable urgency in our modern world. Today, the primary driver of desertification is not a slow orbital cycle, but human-induced climate change. The burning of fossil fuels has supercharged the natural greenhouse effect, leading to rapid warming that alters weather patterns, intensifies droughts, and expands dry lands at an alarming rate. The same processes of overgrazing, deforestation, and poor water management that plagued the ancients are now occurring on an industrial, global scale. The Sahel region in Africa, south of the Sahara, is a heartbreaking contemporary example where a combination of climate change and population pressure is causing productive land to turn to dust, threatening the livelihoods and food security of millions. This is why the study of these lost civilizations is so critically important. It is not merely an academic exercise in history, but a source of vital data for our own survival. These past societies provide us with a long-term laboratory of human-environment interaction. By examining how they responded, whether they innovated, adapted, migrated, or simply collapsed, we can begin to identify the hallmarks of resilience. The key lesson is that the societies that endured were those with flexibility and foresight. They diversified their food sources, developed sophisticated water conservation techniques, and perhaps most importantly, they did not wait until the crisis was upon them to act. They paid attention to the changing signs in their environment and adjusted their practices accordingly. In our current era of rapid climate change, this historical perspective is not a luxury. It is an essential guidebook, offering hard-won wisdom from the past to help us navigate the uncertain future of our own making. The sands that buried empires are whispering to us if we are willing to listen. Deep in the heart of the vast and empty Rub al-Khali, the empty quarter of the Arabian Peninsula, a story was whispered for over 1,000 years. It was a tale of a city of unparalleled wealth, a place of towering palaces and immense fortifications built from precious materials, whose inhabitants grew sinfully rich from the trade of frankincense. But according to the legend, their greed and arrogance grew so great that the city was punished by a vengeful god, swallowed whole by the desert sands in a single night of divine retribution. To the Bedouin tribes who traversed those deadly dunes, this place was known as Yuba. To Western explorers who heard the tales, it became known as the Atlantis of the Sands, a mythical, impossible place that many believed existed only in the realm of fable and moralistic folklore. The legend was so potent because it was rooted in a very real and incredibly valuable historical trade. Frankincense, the aromatic resin harvested from the scraggly trees of southern Arabia, was worth its weight in gold in the ancient world. It was burned in the temples of Rome and Egypt, used in medicinal and cosmetic preparations, and was an essential part of religious and funerary rites across multiple continents. The trade routes that carried this precious cargo across the desert were the superhighways of their day, and it made perfect sense that a major, powerful city would have controlled this lucrative nexus. Yet for centuries, every expedition that went in search of Yuba returned empty-handed or, worse, did not return at all. The desert guarded its secret fiercely, and the city remained a tantalizing enigma, a story to be told around campfires but not to be found on any map. The turning point in this ancient mystery arrived not with a camel caravan, but with a satellite in orbit high above the Earth. In the 1980s, a team led by explorer Nicholas Clapp and archaeologist Joris Zarins employed a powerful new tool, satellite radar imagery provided by NASA. This technology could essentially see through the sand, revealing the subtle, ghostly impressions of ancient tracks and pathways that were completely invisible to the human eye on the ground. By analyzing these images, they identified a convergence of several ancient caravan routes leading to one specific location in modern-day Oman, near the modern settlement of Shisar. It was as if they were looking at a map of ancient interstate highways, all pointing to a single, major interchange. This was the clue they needed. Guided by this space-age cartography, an archaeological expedition was launched. What they began to unearth in the early 1990s was nothing short of extraordinary. They didn't find a city of gold, but they found something far more historically significant: the substantial ruins of a large, fortified settlement. There was an octagonal fortress with towers soaring nearly 30 feet high, built atop a massive limestone cavern. Inside, they found rooms, courtyards, and evidence of large-scale frankincense processing. They discovered artifacts from across the known world: Roman pottery, Persian coins, and Indian beads, proof that this was indeed a major, wealthy trading hub connected to global networks. The legend had a foundation in fact. They had very likely found the real-world heart of the Yuba legend. So what caused its downfall? The evidence points to a dramatic and terrifying catastrophe, though perhaps not the single night of biblical fury described in the tales. The entire city was built precariously over a large, subterranean cave system, a natural cavity in the limestone bedrock. Archaeologists theorize that the very source of the city's initial success, its strategic position at the water source for the caravans, may have been its ultimate undoing. The constant drawing of water from the wells, combined with the immense weight of the city's structures and the constant traffic of heavy loaded camels, likely stressed the cavern roof beyond its limits. At some point, the ground simply gave way. A massive sinkhole opened up, swallowing large portions of the fortress and city walls. The city didn't vanish in a night, but its heart was torn out in a geological instant. After this catastrophe, the trade routes would have bypassed the ruined site. The sands would have drifted in, and within a few generations, all that remained was the story, a cautionary tale about a city that fell from grace, quite literally, into the abyss. The discovery of Yuba is a perfect example of how archaeology and modern technology can work in concert with myth. It shows that these ancient stories, passed down orally for generations, are rarely pure fiction. They are often based on a core historical truth, a shared memory of a significant place or event that has been embellished over time into a powerful narrative. The legend of Yuba served as a cultural compass needle, pointing insistently towards a real location and a real event for centuries, waiting for us to develop the tools to finally follow its direction. It's a reminder that when listening to the oldest stories, we shouldn't just hear fantasy. We should listen for the echoes of lost history. While we often picture the great civilizations of antiquity rising along mighty, permanent rivers, the story of the Indus Valley people reveals a far more complex and fascinating relationship with water. Yes, the legendary cities of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa flourished on the banks of the mighty Indus, but this civilization's reach extended deep into what is now the Thar Desert, a vast and arid region in modern-day India and Pakistan. Here, they didn't just survive, they engineered marvels to conquer the dryness, building cities that were masterclasses in urban planning and water conservation, long before such concepts became urgent global priorities. Their ability to thrive in such a challenging environment makes their ultimate disappearance all the more mysterious and their story profoundly relevant to us today. To understand their genius, we must journey to the island city of Dolavera, located in the salt flats of the Great Rann of Cush. This was not some remote outpost. It was one of the largest and most prominent urban centers of the Indus Valley civilization, and its remains are a stunning open-air textbook on ancient hydraulic engineering. The entire city was planned with breathtaking precision, divided into a fortified castle, a ceremonial middle town, and a lower town, all surrounded by massive defensive walls. But the true lifeline of Dolavera, its absolute masterpiece, was its intricate and extensive water management system. The architects of this desert city did not have a permanent river to rely on. Instead, they harnessed every single drop of water that nature provided, however infrequently. They constructed a series of 16 massive reservoirs, some carved directly into the bedrock that encircled the city. These weren't just simple pits, they were meticulously engineered storage tanks, lined with masonry to prevent seepage and interconnected with a network of channels and drains. Their system was designed to capture every bit of seasonal runoff from the two nearby seasonal streams during the brief, intense monsoon rains. They even built a sophisticated stormwater drainage system within the city walls to channel rooftop and street runoff into these reservoirs. This allowed them to store enough water to sustain a population of several thousand people through the long, punishingly dry seasons. It was a triumph of foresight and communal effort, a society that understood its environmental limitations and engineered its way around them with stunning sophistication. The people of this civilization, also known as the Harappans, were clearly much more than just brilliant plumbers. Excavations across their territory have revealed a culture of remarkable standardization and connectivity. They used uniform weights and measures across a region larger than ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia, which points to a highly organized system of trade and administration. Their enigmatic script, which remains one of the great unsolved puzzles in archaeology, adorned seals and tablets, suggesting a high level of literacy and bureaucratic organization. They were also master craftspeople and global traders. Harappan beads made from carnelian have been found in Mesopotamia, and their distinctive seals have turned up in digs far from the Indus Valley, proving they were a major player in Bronze Age international commerce. This makes the civilization's decline around 1900 BC so deeply puzzling. What could cause such an advanced, adaptable, and widespread society to gradually fragment and abandon its magnificent cities? For a long time, the leading theory pointed to the invasion of nomadic Aryans from the north. However, most modern scholars now believe the answer is far more complex and likely rooted in the same environmental pressures we've seen elsewhere. The lifeblood of their eastern settlements was not the Indus River, but another massive river system, the Ganga, which once flowed through what is now the desert between India and Pakistan. This river, believed by some to be the mythical Saraswati River of ancient Hindu texts, was fed by monsoon rains and glaciers in the Himalayas. Climate science tells us that around the time of the civilization's decline, the region began to undergo a significant climatic shift. The monsoon's patterns began to weaken and become less reliable. Simultaneously, a major tectonic event is thought to have altered the course of several rivers that fed the Ganga, diverting their water away. The result was a catastrophic 1-2 punch. Their primary water source began to shrivel and vanish, transforming a fertile heartland into a spreading desert. The very river that had sustained their agriculture and trade routes was literally drying up beneath their feet. We can imagine the slow-moving crisis that must have unfolded. Years of failing rains would have seen the water levels in Dolivera's magnificent reservoirs drop lower and lower. Crops would have failed, leading to food shortages and likely social unrest. The trade networks that depended on river transport would have collapsed as the waterways turned to sand. Faced with this escalating disaster, the people likely had no choice but to do what humans have always done in the face of environmental collapse: they migrated. They would have dispersed in smaller groups towards the east, where the Ganges River system was becoming more fertile, and to the south, slowly integrating with other cultures and gradually abandoning their sophisticated urban way of life. The sand, ever patient, then drifted over the silent, empty streets of Dolivera and the other great cities, sealing their secrets away for over 3,000 years. The story of the Indus Valley civilization is a powerful reminder that no amount of ingenuity can make a society entirely immune to the vast, impersonal forces of a changing planet. Their legacy is a warning and an inspiration, showing us the heights we can reach through cooperation and innovation. but also the profound vulnerability that comes when the environment upon which we depend suddenly and irrevocably shifts. While the tales of Petra and the Garamantes are stunning, the story of humanity's dance with the desert reaches a spectacular crescendo in the heart of Central Asia. Here, along the fringes of the Kizilkum and Karakum deserts, the concept of the Oasis city was perfected into an art form. These were not mere way stations for weary travelers. They were glittering metropolises, beacons of civilization that shone against a stark, arid backdrop. Cities like Merv in modern-day Turkmenistan and Samarkand in Uzbekistan became legendary names, synonymous with wealth, wisdom, and breathtaking architectural beauty. They stood as powerful testament to a simple, profound truth. In the desert, water is not just a resource, it is the very currency of life and power. The genius of these cities lay in their ability to defy their environment through sheer engineering brilliance. They mastered a technology known as the Karez or Kanat system, a method of tapping into water sources far more sophisticated than simple wells. Imagine teams of workers digging a series of vertical shafts deep into the earth, following the gentle slope of an alluvial fan from the foothills down to the city. Then, at the bottom of these shafts, they would carve out a horizontal tunnel, just large enough for a person to crawl through, connecting each shaft to the next. This subterranean aqueduct would gently guide water from the mountain aquifers, entirely by gravity, for dozens of miles across the parched landscape. The system was nothing short of miraculous. It prevented evaporation under the fierce sun, kept the water clean from sand and contaminants, and delivered a steady, reliable flow directly to the city's heart. This was the invisible lifeline that turned the desert green, allowing vast fields of cotton, melons, and grains to flourish, supporting not just survival but immense prosperity. And prosperous they were. Thanks to this engineered abundance, these oasis cities became the glittering cultural and economic crossroads of the ancient world. Merv at one point was among the largest cities on Earth, a sprawling urban center of parks, libraries, and bustling workshops. Samarkand, with its iconic Registan Square, was a dizzying blend of turquoise-tiled mosques and madrasas, where astronomers charted the stars and poets penned verses that are still revered today. The artifacts unearthed from the sands here tell a story of incredible cultural fusion. In one tomb, you might find Chinese silks next to Byzantine gold coins. In a ruined library, Zoroastrian texts might share shelf space with early Islamic philosophical works and translated Greek scientific manuscripts. These cities were melting pots where Persian administrators, Mongol warriors, Turkish traders, and Arab scholars exchanged not just goods, but ideas, art, and innovations that would shape the course of global history. Yet, for all their grandeur, their existence was perpetually precarious, balanced on a knife's edge. Their magnificent Karez systems required constant, communal maintenance. If a single tunnel collapsed or silted up, it could cut off the water supply to an entire district. This vulnerability made them susceptible to a cascade of disasters. The most direct threat often came from the outside in the form of brutal invasions. The Mongol conquests of the 13th century were particularly catastrophic. When Genghis Khan's armies arrived at the gates of Merv, they were not just conquerors, they were agents of utter devastation. Historical accounts, though possibly exaggerated, speak of the near-total destruction of the city and the massacre of its population. But perhaps the most insidious and lasting damage was the deliberate destruction of the Karez systems. The Mongols understood that to truly break a city's spirit and ensure it could never rise again as a threat, they had to shatter its backbone, its water supply. Without the organized community to maintain them, these intricate tunnels silted up and collapsed, dooming the city to a slow death by thirst. The other great threat was more gradual but just as deadly: the slow decline of the overland Silk Road. As European maritime explorers began opening new sea routes to the Indies and the Far East in the 15th and 16th centuries, the economic gravity of the world shifted. Why undertake a perilous, months-long journey across deadly deserts, paying taxes and tolls to every city along the way, when a ship could carry vastly more cargo for a fraction of the cost? The great caravan trains became less frequent, the markets grew quieter, and the immense wealth that had funded these cities' cultural golden age gradually dried up. Without the money to maintain their complex hydraulic infrastructure, the desert began its patient, inexorable reconquest. The sand dunes, held at bay for centuries by human ingenuity, finally advanced, drifting through the silent streets and over the magnificent blue domes, burying a world of splendor under a blanket of dust. Today, the rediscovery of these cities is rewriting our understanding of Central Asia's role in history. Archaeologists carefully brushing sand away from the walls of a palace in Merv might uncover intricate stucco work depicting scenes from the Shahnameh, the Persian Book of Kings. In Samarkand, restoration efforts reveal the breathtaking scale of Timur's ambition, frozen in tile and stone, each finding chips away at an outdated narrative that positioned this region as a mere backwater between empires. Instead, we see it for what it was: a vibrant, innovative, and central heartland of civilization that pulsed with life for thousands of years. The story of these oasis cities is a powerful, timeless lesson in sustainability. They show us that even the most hostile environments can be transformed into centers of culture and learning, but only through careful, cooperative stewardship of our most precious resources. Their silence today is a haunting reminder that no civilization, no matter how brilliant or beautiful, is permanent if it fails to protect the fragile systems that give it life. Crossing the globe now, we find a strikingly similar story of ingenuity and adaptation unfolding in the deserts of the American Southwest. Here, under the vast, unrelenting sky, the ancestral Pueblones, sometimes called the Anasazi, engineered a way of life that was perfectly attuned to the harsh beauty of the landscape. Their legacy is etched into the very rock itself, in the form of breathtaking cliff dwellings at places like Mesa Verde, where entire multi-story villages were constructed within immense natural alcoves, and in the monumental, great houses of Choco Canyon, massive structures with hundreds of rooms and sophisticated astronomical alignments. These were not primitive shelters, they were the architectural marvels of a complex society, a network of communities connected by straight, engineered roads that stretched across the desert for miles, facilitating trade and cultural exchange across a vast region. What makes their achievements even more remarkable is their deep understanding of the world around them. The great house of Pueblo Bonito in Choco Canyon is a prime example of their celestial wisdom. Its walls and doorways are precisely aligned to capture the light of the solstice sun and the cycles of the moon, turning the entire building into a massive calendar and observatory. This knowledge wasn't just for ceremony, it was essential for survival, dictating the timing of planting and harvest in an environment where a mistake could mean starvation. They were masters of water conservation as well, channeling every precious drop of scarce rainfall through intricate systems of canals and cisterns to nourish their crops of corn, beans, and squash in the dry desert soil. For centuries, this system worked, supporting a thriving and culturally rich society. Then, in the 1300s, something shifted. Tree ring data, which provides an exact annual record of rainfall going back centuries, tells a grim story of a megadrought, a prolonged period of profound aridity that gripped the region for decades. The already marginal environment was pushed past its breaking point. The delicate balance they had maintained for generations began to falter. Springs dried up, carefully tended crops failed, and the piñon pine forests that provided vital nuts and fuel died off. But the drought alone may not have been the sole culprit. There is compelling evidence that centuries of intensive farming and deforestation to meet the needs of a growing population had already stressed the local ecosystem, making it far less resilient when the Great Dry Period finally arrived. The land itself was exhausted. Faced with this escalating crisis, the people made an incredibly difficult but pragmatic decision. They did not simply perish, they organized and migrated. In a great, coordinated movement, they began to leave their magnificent stone cities behind, moving south and east towards places with more reliable water sources, like the Rio Grande Valley. It was not an act of defeat, but one of adaptation and resilience. They took their knowledge, their culture, and their communities with them, eventually establishing the vibrant Pueblo villages that still exist in the region today. The magnificent cliff dwellings and great houses were left silent, empty monuments to a chapter of their history that had closed. For the modern Pueblo peoples, these sites are not forgotten ruins. They are living history, deeply woven into their oral traditions and cultural identity. They are remembered as ancestral homes, places their people came from. This creates a powerful and unique partnership in the modern era, where archaeological findings are often interpreted and enriched through the lens of tribal knowledge. A potsherd pattern can tell an archaeologist about trade, but an elder's story can explain its ceremonial significance. This blending of science and oral history provides a much fuller, more human understanding of the people who built these incredible places. The silent, sand-swept plazas of these southwestern ghost towns hold a powerful and urgent message for us today. They stand as a stark reminder that even the most sophisticated and well-adapted societies are vulnerable to extended climate variability, especially when combined with the strain of their own growth on local resources. Their story echoes our current global concerns about water scarcity, desertification, and the profound challenges of a changing climate. The ancestral Pueblones teach us a lesson in resilience, not just about stubbornly clinging to a place, but about the wisdom of knowing when to adapt, when to change, and how to carry a culture forward into an uncertain future. Their legacy is not one of failure, but of profound survival. But what truly gave life to these desert civilizations, allowing them to not just survive but to flourish into magnificent hubs of culture and power? The answer lies not in the sand itself, but in the intricate, fragile lines that crossed it, the ancient trade routes that functioned as the very arteries of the ancient world. Imagine a single caravan, a long, slow-moving line of camels silhouetted against the setting sun. Each animal is laden with sacks of frankincense, bolts of silk, or ingots of precious metal. This caravan is more than just a delivery service. It is a mobile university, a news network, and a catalyst for innovation, moving at the pace of a walking man across the most unforgiving terrain on Earth. These routes, like the legendary Silk Road or the Trans-Saharan paths, were the absolute lifeblood for cities that otherwise had no reason to exist, transforming barren wastelands into the world's most unexpected and vital crossroads. The sheer scale of these networks is almost incomprehensible. A trader in a Roman port city might wear cotton grown in India, dyed with Phoenician purple, and paid for with pepper that was carried on a journey that took over a year, passing through a dozen different cultures and languages before reaching its final destination. This global exchange was made possible by a chain of oasis towns that served as essential lifelines. A place like Palmyra in the Syrian desert wasn't just a pretty stopover, it was a sophisticated logistical center. Here, caravans could find water, secure shelter from sandstorms, repair their equipment, and pay taxes to the local authorities for protection. In return, the city grew immensely wealthy, using that wealth to build stunning colonnaded streets and ornate temples that proclaimed their success to the world. Similarly, Timbuktu, on the southern edge of the Sahara, became legendary not for its gold, but for its role as the northern terminus of the trans-Saharan trade, where salt from the desert met gold from the forests of West Africa, and where scholars gathered in universities to study texts carried across the dunes. The artifacts left behind in the sand tell this story of connection more eloquently than any history book. In a ruin in Mongolia, an archaeologist might uncover a coin minted in Constantinople. In a tomb in Arabia, they might find a piece of Chinese silk wrapped around a local chieftain. A shattered ceramic pot found in the ruins of a desert caravanserai might be analyzed and found to have been fired in a kiln in Persia, its distinctive glaze acting as a fingerprint that traces its journey across continents. Each of these objects is a data point, mapping a network of human interaction that was vast, complex, and astonishingly resilient. This trade wasn't just about luxury goods for the elite, it was about the exchange of everything. Ideas, religions, technologies, and even diseases traveled these same routes. The paper upon which Islamic scholars preserved Greek philosophy, the astronomical knowledge that allowed for desert navigation, the stirrup that revolutionized cavalry warfare, all of these innovations hitched a ride on the backs of camels, moving from one civilization to another and altering the course of history. This incredible interdependence, however, was also their greatest vulnerability. The prosperity of a city like Palmyra was a house of cards, built entirely on its position as a neutral broker in the middle of nowhere. When the political winds shifted, as they did when the city challenged the might of Rome, the entire enterprise could collapse in an instant. The Romans besieged, sacked, and broke the city's power, deliberately redirecting trade away from it to punish its ambition. Almost overnight, the caravan stopped coming. The water in the Oasis pools grew still, and the sand began its slow, patient work of filling the grand avenues and temples. The same story played out with the rise of maritime trade. Why would a merchant risk bandits, sandstorms, and extortionate taxes on a months-long desert journey when a ship could carry 100 times the cargo for a fraction of the cost? As European sailors learned to navigate the oceans, the economic gravity of the world shifted from the inner continents to the coastlines. The great inland ports of the desert were suddenly left high and dry, economically stranded. The trade that had been their reason for being simply vanished, leaving behind empty markets and silent streets. The silence that followed is what archaeologists now work to decipher. The burial of these cities by the sand, which seemed like a final act of obliteration, was in fact an act of unparalleled preservation. The very thing that cut them off from the world, the shifting dunes, sealed them in a time capsule, protecting the fragile remnants of their globalized world from the erasing effects of wind and rain. Uncovering a buried caravanserai is like opening a lost package from the past. We find the everyday objects of the merchants, the remnants of their meals, and the tokens of their faith, all frozen in the moment the last caravan left. This evidence allows us to trace the rise and fall of these desert dynasties not as isolated events, but as pulses in a vast global network. Their fates were inextricably linked to the ebb and flow of commerce and geopolitics on a scale they could scarcely imagine, demonstrating that even the most powerful desert kingdom was ultimately at the mercy of the currents of global exchange. Yet even as we marvel at the grand trade networks and the cities they supported, we must ask a more fundamental question: how did life itself persist in these parched landscapes? The true bedrock of every desert dynasty was not gold or silk, but something far more precious: water, and the ability to secure it consistently transformed these societies from mere survivors into masters of their environment. Across the globe, isolated from one another, ancient engineers independently arrived at breathtakingly sophisticated solutions to this universal challenge, creating water management systems so effective that some are still in use today. This was a silent, underground revolution of survival, fought not with swords but with shovels, picks, and an intimate understanding of the earth. In the high deserts of Persia, one of the most impactful inventions in human history emerged: the Qanat. This was not a simple well, but a gravity-fed subterranean aqueduct of astonishing complexity. To build one, skilled surveyors first identified a water source, typically an aquifer at the base of a mountain range. Then, teams of workers began digging a series of vertical shafts down into the earth, each one spaced about 20 to 50 meters apart, creating a line of access points that looked like a trail of giant anthills marching across the desert. From the bottom of each shaft, they would then tunnel horizontally, connecting each shaft to the next, creating a gently sloping underground channel that could stretch for miles. The genius of this design was multifaceted. By keeping the water underground, the Qanat virtually eliminated loss from evaporation under the fierce desert sun. It also naturally filtered the water, keeping it clean and cool as it flowed effortlessly by gravity from its source all the way to the city and farmlands below. This wasn't just a piece of infrastructure, it was the very foundation of Persian civilization, allowing them to build thriving cities like Yazd in the middle of the desert, and creating a reliable, communal water source that could be fairly distributed based on the time each user was allowed to draw from it. Meanwhile, on the Indian subcontinent, another water harvesting marvel was taking shape, one that combined profound utility with stunning architectural beauty: the stepwell. Known as bayolis or valves, these were not merely places to collect water. They were subterranean temples, community centers, and natural refrigerators, all rolled into one. In the dry season, as the water table dropped, builders would dig deep into the earth, creating massive, inverted pyramids of steps that led down to the receding water. The steps provided easy access for people to reach the water at any level, while the sheer depth of the structure provided a cool respite from the blistering heat above ground. The walls of these stepwells were often adorned with intricate carvings of Hindu deities, turning the act of fetching water into a spiritual pilgrimage. The most magnificent example is perhaps the Rani Kai Vav, the Queen's Stepwell, in Gujarat, a UNESCO World Heritage Site that descends 7 stories underground, with over 500 principal sculptures and 1,000 minor ones lining its walls. It functioned as a massive rainwater harvesting system, capturing the torrential monsoon rains and storing them for the long, dry months that followed, while its design minimized evaporation far more effectively than an open pond. And we cannot forget the Nabateans of Petra, whom we've already met, whose water mastery was their defining trait. Their system was one of total control. They carved channels directly into the cliff faces to capture water from every possible spring and rainfall runoff across a vast catchment area. They constructed massive, plaster-lined cisterns, some capable of holding over 400,000 gallons of water, hidden throughout their territory to supply caravans. Most impressively, they built an extensive network of terracotta pipes, pressurized to push water uphill and across valleys, delivering it directly to the palaces, gardens, and public fountains of their desert capital. Their entire city was a monument to hydraulic engineering, a machine for living in the desert. Yet, for all their brilliance, these systems contained a critical vulnerability. They were designed based on a deep understanding of the local environment, but they often relied on a delicate balance that could be upset by either human activity or natural change. The Qanats of Persia required constant communal maintenance to clear silt and prevent tunnel collapses. If social order broke down or if populations declined, this maintenance was neglected and the Khanats failed. Furthermore, these systems often tapped into fossil water aquifers, ancient underground reserves that were not being replenished at the rate they were being used. The Garamantes, with their Fagara systems, essentially mined this ancient water, and when it was gone for good. A prolonged climatic shift towards greater aridity could lower the water table beyond the reach of their wells and Khanats, rendering their entire investment useless. This ancient wisdom, born of necessity, is now experiencing a dramatic revival. In the face of modern water crises and climate change, engineers and planners are looking back to these time-tested technologies for inspiration. In arid regions from New Mexico to Oman, there is a renewed interest in Khanat systems for their energy efficiency. They require no pumps, only gravity, and their minimal evaporative loss. The principles of stepwells are being studied for large-scale rainwater harvesting projects in India, aiming to recharge depleted aquifers. The Nabatean techniques of capturing and controlling every drop of runoff are being applied in modern landscape architecture to combat desertification. These ancient methods represent a form of sustainable, appropriate technology that works in harmony with local ecology, rather than trying to overwhelm it with massive, energy-intensive projects like desalination plants. They remind us that the answers to our most pressing modern challenges may not always lie in inventing something new, but in rediscovering the profound wisdom of the past, a wisdom that understood the value of a single drop of water and the intricate systems required to sustain life in a thirsty world. The story of uncovering lost desert civilizations is not just one of discovery, but also of possession, a complex narrative deeply entangled with the era of European colonialism. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, as Western powers expanded their global influence, the deserts of Asia and Africa became a new frontier for exploration, but often with a mindset that viewed these lands as empty, their buried treasures free for the taking. This approach framed archaeology not as a scholarly pursuit of understanding, but as a grand treasure hunt, a race to extract the most spectacular artifacts for the museums and private collections of the West. The deserts, with their remote and often ungoverned spaces, became the perfect stage for this drama, where the line between explorer and conqueror frequently blurred. One of the most famous and controversial figures from this period is Aurel Stein, a Hungarian-British adventurer and archaeologist. Armed with a formidable intellect and relentless drive, Stein made several expeditions into the Taklamakan Desert in the early 1900s, following in the footsteps of the ancient Silk Road. His work was undeniably groundbreaking. He rediscovered long-lost cities, unearthed thousands of ancient documents in myriad languages, and brought to light the incredible cultural exchange that defined the region. However, his methods are viewed far more critically today. Stein and his contemporaries operated with a sense of entitlement, often leveraging the political and military power of the British Empire to secure permits and facilitate the removal of vast quantities of material. His most famous acquisition, the Diamond Sutra, a sacred Buddhist text considered the world's oldest dated printed book, was taken from the sealed cave 17 at the Mogao Caves near Dunhuang, a library cave sealed for a millennium. He secured it from a fearful local caretaker for a pittance, and it, along with countless other scrolls, paintings, and artifacts, now resides in the British Library, thousands of miles from its home. This extractive model of archaeology had profound and lasting consequences. Sites were often treated like mines, with teams digging quickly to remove the most visually impressive or academically valuable objects, while less glamorous but equally important evidence, animal bones, seeds, everyday pottery, was disregarded or destroyed in the process. The context of these finds, which is so crucial to understanding their true meaning, was frequently lost. More importantly, this practice stripped communities of their cultural heritage. These artifacts were not merely abstract historical objects. They were and are vital links to the past for the descendants of those who created them. Their removal to foreign institutions created a void, a physical disconnect between people and their own history, reinforcing colonial narratives that positioned Western powers as the rightful custodians and interpreters of global culture, while the source nations were cast as passive beneficiaries of this rescue. In the decades since the end of the colonial era, the field of archaeology has undergone a profound and necessary ethical reckoning. The focus has dramatically shifted from extraction to preservation, from ownership to collaboration. Modern projects are increasingly built on partnerships with local governments, universities, and, most importantly, local communities. This collaborative approach recognizes that the people living near these sites are not merely a source of labor, but are essential stakeholders with deep cultural knowledge and a rightful claim to their own heritage. Archaeologists now spend years building relationships, training and working alongside local teams, and ensuring that the benefits of research, from economic opportunities to educational programs, are shared. This new ethic prioritizes in situ preservation whenever possible, questioning whether an object truly needs to be moved or if it can be studied and protected where it was found. Advanced technology like three-dimensional scanning allows for detailed digital analysis without ever touching a fragile artifact. When excavation is necessary, it is conducted with painstaking slowness and care, with every grain of soil sifted for information, recognizing that the data is often more valuable than the object itself. The goal is no longer to fill a museum case abroad, but to build a museum and a sense of pride locally. This paradigm shift acknowledges that archaeology is not a neutral science. It is a powerful act that involves unearthing not just pottery and bones, but also identity, memory, and sometimes trauma. The legacy of colonialism serves as a permanent reminder that every trowel cut into the earth carries a weight of responsibility. As we continue to reveal the hidden dynasties beneath the sand, we must do so with a commitment to listening, to sharing, and to honoring the living cultures that are the true inheritors of these lost worlds, ensuring the stories we tell are not just about them, but are ultimately for and with them. But the real revolution in uncovering these lost worlds isn't just happening in the desert sun with a trowel and brush. It's happening in orbit, in the air, and on computer screens, where a suite of astonishing technologies is allowing us to see straight through the sand. Imagine having a kind of X-ray vision that could peel back layers of dust and stone to reveal the ghostly outlines of entire cities hidden beneath your feet. This is no longer science fiction. It's the daily reality of modern desert archaeology, a field that has been utterly transformed from a slow, laborious guessing game into a precise, high-tech science. This shift is crucial because every time we break the ground in these fragile environments, we risk destroying the very history we seek to preserve. The sand is a perfect conservator, but exposure is its greatest enemy. The new goal, therefore, is to disturb as little as possible, to explore without ever touching, and technology is the magic key that makes this possible. At the forefront of this revolution is LiDAR, which stands for light detection and ranging. Here's how this wizardry works. A specially equipped aircraft or drone flies over a target area, firing millions of laser pulses toward the ground every single second. Each pulse hits the surface and bounces back to a sensor, and by meticulously measuring the time it takes for that light to return, a computer can build an incredibly detailed, three-dimensional map of the terrain. The true power of LiDAR, especially in desert environments, is its ability to digitally strip away surface clutter like scrub vegetation or even sand dunes themselves. In one famous case, LiDAR surveys over the jungles of Central America revealed vast Mayan cities that had been completely invisible to the naked eye. In the desert, this technology is being used to map the subtle, human-made contours of the land, the faint remnants of walls, roads, and irrigation canals that are otherwise indistinguishable from the natural landscape, giving archaeologists a detailed blueprint of a buried city before they ever set foot on the site. Complementing this eye in the sky is the quiet hum of the drone, which has become an indispensable workhorse in the archaeologist's toolkit. These aren't just fancy remote-controlled toys. They are sophisticated data-gathering platforms equipped with high-resolution cameras, thermal sensors, and even miniature ground-penetrating radar units. They can soar over vast expanses of desert in minutes, capturing thousands of overlapping photographs that are then stitched together using photogrammetry software to create ultra-high-resolution maps and three-dimensional models of excavation sites. This allows researchers to monitor the slow progress of a dig with millimeter accuracy, to spot subtle soil discoloration that might indicate a buried wall, or to create a permanent digital record of an artifact's exact position and orientation the moment it's uncovered, preserving that critical context forever. Drones provide a perspective that is simply impossible from the ground, turning a sprawling, confusing landscape into a legible historical document. Then there are the technologies that listen to the Earth rather than look at it. Ground-penetrating radar, or GPR, is like giving the desert a sophisticated ultrasound. A technician slowly pushes a cart with a radar antenna over the ground, sending high-frequency radio waves into the soil. These waves bounce back at different speeds and intensities depending on what they hit. A solid stone wall will return a very different signal than a hollow tomb or a layer of loose backfill. By interpreting these returning signals, archaeologists can create a detailed subsurface map, identifying the depth and shape of buried structures without ever putting a shovel in the ground. This not only pinpoints exactly where to dig for maximum results, but also helps to avoid damaging fragile, unseen features. It's a way of respectfully asking the Earth what lies beneath before we decide to investigate. A powerful example of all these technologies working in concert is unfolding right now in Egypt's western desert, around the remote Dakka Oasis. For centuries, this area was thought to be a mere periphery of the Nile Valley civilization. But by analyzing declassified Cold War-era spy satellite imagery and combining it with modern drone surveys and ground-penetrating radar, researchers have made a series of breathtaking discoveries. They've identified a sprawling network of ancient caravan routes, complete with way stations and fortifications, that once bustled with activity. They've mapped the outlines of entire settlements that served as crucial hubs for trade between the Nile and the deeper Sahara. This technology has effectively rewritten the map of ancient Egypt, proving that its influence and its people were far more connected to the vast desert interior than we ever imagined, turning a blank space on the historical map into a vibrant corridor of human movement and exchange. This high-tech, non-invasive approach is also a profound ethical leap forward. It minimizes the physical impact on culturally sensitive and fragile sites, preserving them for future generations of researchers who will undoubtedly have even better tools at their disposal. It allows for the virtual preservation of sites that are threatened by modern development, looting, or the accelerating effects of climate change. We can now create a perfect digital twin of an ancient structure, allowing anyone in the world to explore it in immersive detail long after the original may have crumbled to dust. This marriage of technology and archaeology is not about replacing the careful, patient work of excavation. It's about making that work smarter, more targeted, and more respectful. It's about listening to the whispers of the past with ever more sensitive ears, transforming what were once mere legends and mysteries into a tangible, mapeable, and deeply understood history, all without disturbing the patient, preserving embrace of the sand. Yet the true measure of their legacy isn't confined to museums or history books. It lives and breathes in the very fabric of contemporary life, often in ways we scarcely recognize. Consider the humble carrot you might snack on, or the peach you enjoy in summer. These common foods, along with almonds, cucumbers, and a host of other staples, were not native to Europe or Africa. They were cultivated and traded along those very Silk Road routes, their seeds carried in the saddlebags of merchants moving between Asia and the Mediterranean. Our global cuisine is a direct, delicious inheritance from those ancient desert traders, a testament to a cultural exchange that began millennia ago and still shapes our dinners today. This diffusion of ideas extended far beyond the material. The mathematical concept of zero, so fundamental to our digital world, likely made its way from Indian scholars to the Middle East and eventually to Europe through the intellectual networks that ran alongside the trade routes. The libraries of Samarkand and Baghdad became centers for translating and preserving Greek philosophical and scientific texts, which might have been lost forever had they not been safeguarded and studied in these desert hubs before being reintroduced to a Europe emerging from the Dark Ages. The very foundations of the Renaissance were, in many ways, laid in the sand. This enduring influence challenges the very notion of a lost civilization. While a political entity like the Garamantes kingdom or the Nabatean dynasty may have faded, their cultural DNA did not. It was absorbed, adapted, and repurposed by the empires and cultures that followed. The Berber tribes of North Africa carry forward traditions and linguistic roots that connect back to the Sahara's earlier inhabitants. The intricate irrigation techniques honed in the deserts of Persia and Arabia were adopted and spread by Islamic civilizations across North Africa and into Spain, where they transformed agriculture and shaped the landscape of Andalusia. These were not clean breaks in history, but rather a continuous process of cultural osmosis, where the wisdom of the past was not discarded, but instead became a vital ingredient in the recipe of the future. The silence of their cities, therefore, is deceptive. Their voices are merely woven into a larger, ongoing conversation. Preserving this fragile heritage is an act of global citizenship, a way of honoring our shared human story. When archaeologists painstakingly conserve a faded mural in a Kushite tomb or digitally reconstruct a crumbling Garamantes fagara, they are doing more than just saving relics. They are safeguarding a library of human ingenuity, a record of different ways to solve the universal problems of survival, community, and meaning. Museums play a crucial role in this, acting as bridges between these ancient worlds and the public. A visitor standing before the serene face of the Nia beauty or tracing the intricate carvings on a Nabatean tomb facade isn't just looking at an artifact. They are making a human connection across an immense gulf of time, recognizing the same hopes, skills, and artistic drive that we possess today. These institutions transform abstract historical concepts into tangible, emotional experiences. Ultimately, the greatest tribute we can pay to these desert dynasties is to learn from their legacy, not just admire it. Their stories are masterclasses in adaptation, in the clever management of scarce resources, and in building resilience in the face of environmental uncertainty. In an era of climate change and water scarcity, their ancient wisdom feels strikingly modern. The Qanat systems of Persia are being re-studied by engineers looking for sustainable irrigation solutions. The Nabatean mastery of water capture and storage offers lessons for modern cities in arid regions. By understanding how they flourished, we gain not just a deeper appreciation for the past, but a valuable toolkit for the future. Their civilizations may have been reclaimed by the sand, but their innovations, their art, and their spirit of resilience remain as beacons, reminding us of the incredible things humanity can achieve even under the most daunting circumstances. There's something deeply and universally human about the idea of a lost city. It's a concept that transcends language and culture, tapping into a part of our psyche that yearns for the unknown. This isn't just a mild curiosity, it's a powerful, almost primal attraction. Think about the stories that have captivated us for generations. The myth of Atlantis, the legend of El Dorado, the fabled Shangri-La. These aren't mere tales, they are manifestations of a fundamental human desire to believe that there are still great secrets waiting to be found, that the world holds wonders beyond our current understanding. A lost city represents the ultimate puzzle, a tantalizing blend of verified history and pure, unadulterated mystery. We know, logically, that a place like Yuba or a civilization like the Garamantes once existed, but the sand has swallowed the details of their daily lives, their triumphs, and their failures. This gap between knowledge and mystery is where our imagination ignites, painting those empty spaces with visions of grandeur, advanced knowledge, or tragic endings. This powerful allure is the engine behind so much of our popular culture. The iconic image of Indiana Jones braving booby traps to retrieve a priceless artifact isn't just entertaining. It's a direct reflection of our own romanticized dreams of discovery. These stories simplify the often tedious academic work of archaeology into a narrative of pure adventure, where a single determined individual can unlock the secrets of the ages. And while real archaeology is far more methodical, involving painstaking brushwork and laboratory analysis, that core thrill of revelation is absolutely real. When Howard Carter first peered into Tutankhamun's tomb and was asked if he could see anything, his whispered reply, "Yes, wonderful things," captures that electrifying moment of connection across millennia. It's a feeling that transcends the individual. It's the sudden, stunning realization that a story thought to be over is still being told, and we have just turned the page. This deep-seated fascination does more than just sell movie tickets. It actively fuels real-world exploration and research. Public interest, generated by best-selling books and breathtaking documentaries, translates directly into funding for archaeological digs and the development of new technologies like satellite imaging and ground-penetrating radar. Tourism provides the economic incentive for governments and local communities to protect and preserve these fragile sites. The quest for lost cities pushes the boundaries of science, leading to innovations that allow us to see through sand and rock, effectively giving us X-ray vision to scan the past. This cycle of curiosity, discovery, and sharing ensures that the field of desert archaeology remains dynamic and constantly evolving. Each new generation, inspired by the finds of the last, brings fresh perspectives and new tools to the search, ensuring that the map of our history is never truly complete. On a deeper, more personal level, the psychological pull of these places satisfies a profound need for connection. In our modern, often disconnected world, standing before the monumental ruins of Petra or walking the silent streets of a long-abandoned Silk Road city provides a tangible link to the vast tapestry of human experience. It's a humbling and awe-inspiring reminder that we are part of a much longer story. These stones were touched by people who loved, feared, dreamed, and built wonders just as we do. Their disappearance whispers cautionary tales about environmental change, resource management, and the fragility of even the most powerful societies, lessons that feel incredibly urgent today. Ultimately, the search for lost cities is a search for ourselves. It is an attempt to understand where we came from, to learn from those who came before us, and to find our own place in the relentless flow of history. It proves that our hunger for discovery is not just about the past, but about making sense of our present and finding direction for our future. Yet for all our modern technology and scientific rigor, the most enduring stories of the desert are often those wrapped in the shimmering veil of myth. Across cultures and centuries, the vast, empty landscapes have acted as a perfect canvas for the human imagination, inspiring tales of cities so magnificent they were punished for their pride, or of hidden valleys offering eternal peace and wisdom. Think of Aram of the Pillars, mentioned in the Quran as a city of such arrogance that it was wiped from the earth by a savage, sand-laden wind, or the Himalayan legend of Shangri-La, a secluded paradise untouched by time or trouble. These are not mere fairy tales, they are profound cultural narratives, allegories that wrestle with universal themes of morality, the dangers of hubris, and our deep, abiding yearning for an earthly paradise. They represent our attempt to explain the unexplainable, to make sense of the immense, silent power of the desert and the mysterious fates of those who once thrived there. The fascinating work of historians and archaeologists lies in carefully disentangling these threads of fact and fiction, not to ruin a good story, but to understand the kernel of truth that inspired it. They approach these legends not as dismissive skeptics, but as detectives, asking a simple question: why would this specific story emerge from this specific place? Often, the answer lies in the landscape itself. A massive, inexplicable ruin glimpsed by a lone traveler, or a strange artifact found half buried in the dunes, could easily become the seed for an epic tale told and retold around countless campfires. With each telling, the story evolves, the historical reality fading while the moral and symbolic elements grow larger, transforming a forgotten trading post into a city of gold, or a powerful queen into a semi-divine being of legendary beauty and cunning. A perfect example of this beautiful blur between history and myth is the enduring legend of the Queen of Sheba. The biblical and Quranic accounts describe a powerful monarch from the south who journeyed to King Solomon's court in Jerusalem, laden with extravagant gifts of gold, spices, and precious stones to test his famed wisdom. Their meeting is charged with intellect, mutual respect, and a hint of romance, a story that has inspired art, literature, and opera for millennia. For a long time, she was considered a purely mythical figure, a symbolic representation of wealth and exotic beauty. But archaeology has begun to reveal the historical substrate that likely gave rise to her legend. We now know the civilization of Saba, or Sheba, was very real, flourishing in the deserts of southern Arabia, in modern-day Yemen, around the 10th century BC. The Sabaeans were indeed fantastically wealthy, their riches built on the monopolistic control of the frankincense and myrrh trade, exactly the spices attributed to the queen. Their capital, Marib, was a thriving metropolis sustained by a massive, sophisticated dam that irrigated the surrounding desert, creating a green oasis of immense agricultural productivity. It is not difficult to imagine how tales of this powerful, sophisticated, and incredibly wealthy kingdom, a land ruled by a succession of powerful mukaribs or priest kings who may have included female rulers, would travel north with the caravan trains. By the time these stories reached the Levant, repeated over and over by merchants, the reality of a complex Sabaean trading empire could have easily been personified into the compelling story of a single, magnificent queen undertaking an epic journey to meet the wisest king of another land. The myth of the Queen of Sheba, therefore, is not a lie but a different kind of truth, a narrative encapsulation of very real economic, political, and cultural interactions between two powerful civilizations, distilled into a timeless human drama. This intersection of myth and history does more than just provide colorful stories. It profoundly enriches our understanding of the past. These legends are a form of collective memory, a way for cultures to preserve the importance of a place or event long after the factual details have faded. They are a testament to the power of storytelling as a fundamental human tool for making sense of our world and our place within it. When we listen to these tales, we are not just being entertained, we are being given a window into the values, fears, and aspirations of the people who first told them. The next time you hear a story of a lost city or a legendary ruler, instead of dismissing it as pure fantasy, consider what real history might be hiding within it, waiting for the right key to unlock its secrets. So where does this leave us, standing at the edge of the 21st century with the tools to see through sand and the wisdom to listen to the echoes of the past more carefully than ever before? The future of desert archaeology is a thrilling and paradoxical landscape shaped by two powerful and opposing forces. On one hand, we are on the cusp of a technological golden age. Artificial intelligence is no longer just a futuristic concept. It's becoming an indispensable research partner. Imagine feeding millions of satellite images, drone surveys, and decades of excavation reports into a sophisticated algorithm. This AI could cross-reference data on a scale impossible for the human brain, identifying subtle patterns in the soil, predicting the most likely locations of undiscovered settlements based on ancient trade winds and water sources, and even assisting in the automated translation of those stubborn, undeciphered scripts like the Indus Valley symbols. It's like giving every archaeologist a team of 1,000 tireless research assistants, all working in perfect synchrony to map the hidden geography of human history. Alongside AI, the march of remote sensing technology continues at a breathtaking pace. The next generation of satellites will possess even higher resolution cameras and more advanced spectral imaging capabilities, allowing them to detect not just the shapes of buried structures, but the chemical composition of the soil itself, potentially revealing the ghostly outlines of ancient agricultural fields or the residue of long-decayed wooden posts. Drones will become more autonomous, capable of conducting systematic, large-scale surveys of dangerous or inaccessible terrain, from the sheer cliffs of canyon lands to the heart of active dune fields. We are moving towards a future where the initial discovery phase of a lost city might be conducted entirely from an office on the other side of the planet, with teams of specialists guiding robotic explorers to make the first, delicate contact with a world untouched for millennia. This isn't about replacing the human element, it's about augmenting our senses to a superhuman degree, allowing us to explore with a reverence and precision that was once unimaginable. Yet this bright future is shadowed by a clear and present danger. The very environment that has preserved these sites for centuries is now turning against them, not through natural cycles, but because of human-induced climate change. The increased frequency and intensity of extreme weather events pose a dire threat. Sudden, torrential downpours in normally arid regions can cause catastrophic flash flooding, washing away entire layers of archaeological deposits in a single destructive event. Conversely, prolonged and intensified droughts can lead to increased soil erosion, as the delicate crust that holds the desert floor together dries out and crumbles, leaving sites exposed and vulnerable to the scouring wind. Perhaps most alarmingly, as previously inaccessible areas become drier and more traversable, they also become more vulnerable to looting. The illegal antiquities trade is a multi-billion-dollar criminal enterprise, and the high-tech tools that aid archaeologists are also available to looters, who use satellite imagery and drones to pinpoint valuable sites and strip them of artifacts with brutal efficiency, destroying the context and the story forever in their greedy rush for saleable objects. This dual reality of unprecedented opportunity and escalating risk makes one thing abundantly clear. The era of the solitary explorer working in isolation is well and truly over. The path forward is paved with international collaboration and a shared sense of stewardship. We are seeing the rise of truly global projects where universities, research institutions, and government agencies from multiple countries pool their resources, expertise, and cultural perspectives. This collaborative model ensures that the incredible stories being unearthed are understood not as the property of any one nation, but as chapters in the shared story of humanity. It promotes ethical practices, ensures that discoveries benefit local communities economically and culturally, and creates a united front against the threats of looting and climate degradation. This is no longer just about archaeology. It's about global citizenship and preserving our collective memory for generations to come. As this new, collaborative, and technologically supercharged wave of exploration continues to advance, we must be prepared for surprises that will fundamentally challenge our understanding of the past. Every new discovery in the desert sands has the potential to rewrite a paragraph, a page, or even an entire chapter of history. The next decade may reveal a previously unknown trading empire that connected the Sahara to the Amazon, or uncover evidence of a technological innovation that predates our current timelines by 1,000 years. Each of these findings adds another thread to the vast and intricate tapestry of human experience, revealing the astonishing diversity of ways in which our species has found to live, to build, and to create meaning in the world's most challenging environments. The work of desert archaeology, therefore, is far from complete. In many ways, it feels like we are just beginning. The sands have guarded their secrets for thousands of years, and they are not about to give them up easily. But with patience, respect, and the clever application of our brightest minds and most advanced tools, we will continue to listen, to learn, and to be humbled by the resilience and ingenuity of those who walked the dunes before us. Unearthing the past is never a simple act of digging. It is an encounter with profound ethical questions that demand as much attention as the technical details of the excavation itself. When we brush the sand away from a millennia-old wall or lift a fragile artifact into the light, we are not just uncovering an object, we are interacting with a legacy. This process is fraught with dilemmas that force us to ask, who does this history truly belong to? The pursuit of knowledge must be carefully balanced against the imperative to preserve these irreplaceable sites for future generations. Every time we break the ground, we alter the context forever, and in fragile desert environments, even a well-meaning excavation can accelerate erosion or damage that took centuries to lay dormant. The choice of what to dig, how to dig it, and what to leave undisturbed is the first major ethical hurdle, requiring a philosophy of minimal intervention and maximum respect for the integrity of the site itself. Perhaps the most significant shift in modern archaeology has been the move away from a colonial mindset that viewed ancient artifacts as treasures to be collected and displayed in distant museums. For centuries, excavations in deserts from Egypt to Mesopotamia were treated as extractive industries, with foreign expeditions often removing vast quantities of material under questionable agreements, stripping local communities of their cultural heritage and creating a legacy of distrust that lingers to this day. The Parthenon marbles in the British Museum or the bust of Nefertiti in Berlin are famous flashpoints in this ongoing global conversation about repatriation, the return of cultural property to its country or community of origin. This is not merely a political debate. It is a fundamental question of justice and ownership. The argument for repatriation is powerfully simple. These objects are not merely beautiful artifacts. They are vital fragments of a living cultural identity, and their removal represents a historical wrong that needs to be righted. Museums in the global north are increasingly facing pressure to reckon with their colonial pasts and engage in good faith dialogues about returning these items, transforming their role from sole proprietors of history to partners in a global cultural exchange. This new ethical framework places collaboration with local and indigenous communities at the very heart of the archaeological process. It recognizes that the people who live on the land, often the descendants of those who created the sites being studied, are not merely stakeholders but essential partners. Their oral histories, traditional knowledge, and deep spiritual connection to the landscape can provide context and understanding that no outsider could ever hope to grasp. A powerful model for this approach is found in Australia, where desert archaeology has undergone a radical transformation. Projects working on Aboriginal lands are now typically led or co-directed by Aboriginal elders and community members. Before any work begins, extensive consultations are held to determine if the community even wants an excavation to proceed. Some sites, sacred and sensitive, are deemed best left untouched, their secrets respected rather than exposed. When digging does go ahead, Indigenous rangers often work alongside archaeologists, sharing their knowledge of the land and ensuring that cultural protocols are strictly followed. The goal is no longer just to extract data for academic papers, but to empower communities to reclaim and tell their own stories, strengthening cultural pride and continuity in the process. Ultimately, ethical archaeology is about ensuring that the story we tell is not only accurate but also fair and comprehensive. It acknowledges that the narrative of the past has often been written by the powerful, frequently overlooking the lives of everyday people, women, and marginalized groups. By involving diverse voices in the interpretation process, we can build a richer, more nuanced understanding of history that reflects the true complexity of ancient societies. This mindful approach transforms archaeology from a solitary science into a shared human endeavor. It understands that the trowel and brush are not just tools for moving earth, they are instruments for building bridges of understanding across time and culture. As we continue to reveal the hidden dynasties beneath the sand, our greatest responsibility is to ensure that the process honors the people who built them, respects the communities who remember them, and shares the knowledge we gain in a spirit of collaboration rather than conquest. The integrity of the past depends not just on what we find, but on how we choose to find it. It's easy to look at the ruins of a place like Petra or a lost Silk Road city and see them as relics, fascinating but disconnected from our modern world. But that perspective couldn't be more mistaken. The truth is, the ingenious spirit of these desert dynasties is alive and well today, woven so deeply into the fabric of our daily lives that we often don't even see it. Their greatest legacy isn't just the magnificent stones they left behind. It's the revolutionary ideas they pioneered, solutions born from the necessity of surviving Earth's harshest environments that continue to shape our world in profound and unexpected ways. Consider the simple act of turning on a tap for a glass of clean, cold water. This everyday miracle has its roots in the ancient world's struggle to conquer thirst. The Qanat systems of Persia, those brilliant underground aqueducts that brought water for miles without a single pump, are experiencing a major revival. Modern engineers are now looking back at these ancient designs as a supremely sustainable solution for arid regions. Why? Because they operate entirely on gravity, requiring zero energy, and they lose almost no water to evaporation, a critical advantage in a warming world. This isn't just a historical footnote, it's active, cutting-edge environmental science. Similarly, the intricate water capture and storage methods of the Nabateans, who channeled every drop of sporadic rainfall into cisterns and pipes, are now inspiring modern water harvesting techniques in places like the American Southwest, where architects and landscapers design homes and communities to capture and reuse rainwater, mimicking those 2,000-year-old blueprints to combat contemporary drought. The influence extends far beyond water. The very layout of our cities owes a debt to the organized, efficient urban planning of ancient desert hubs. The Indus Valley city of Dolavera, with its precisely ordered sectors, advanced drainage, and communal reservoirs, demonstrates a level of civic planning that would impress any modern urban developer. Their understanding of public health, waste management, and zoning reveals a sophisticated approach to communal living that we are still striving to perfect today. Even the concept of a centralized, bustling marketplace, the economic heart of any major city, finds its purest expression in the caravanserais and bustling sucks of the Silk Road, which were the prototypes for globalized commerce. These were the original hubs of international exchange, where goods, currencies, and ideas from across the known world were traded in a single, vibrant space, a direct ancestor of our modern stock exchanges and global shipping networks. Perhaps the most ubiquitous gift from these desert civilizations is one we use every single day, often without a second thought: our number system. The digits 0 through 9 that form the foundation of all modern mathematics, science, and engineering are famously known as Arabic numerals. But this is a bit of a misnomer. They were actually refined and popularized in the great academic centers of the Islamic world, like Baghdad's House of Wisdom, which itself was an oasis of scholarship in a vast cultural desert. Scholars there synthesized knowledge from India, Greece, and Persia, and it was through their texts that this efficient numeral system, complete with the revolutionary concept of zero as a placeholder, was transmitted to Europe. This advancement utterly revolutionized calculation, making complex mathematics and astronomy possible and paving the way for everything from engineering feats to financial systems. Every time you send a text message, every line of code that powers the internet, and every financial transaction that occurs online relies on a mathematical language that was perfected in the desert's scholarly sanctuaries. This continuous thread of innovation, stretching from the ancient world to our own, offers a powerful sense of perspective. We often view human progress as a straight, upward line, with our modern technological era standing alone at the pinnacle. But the reality is so much richer and more humbling. We are not separate from history, we are its product. Every time a city planner designs a sustainable water system, every time a mathematician solves a complex equation, they are standing on the shoulders of ancient giants who first wrestled with these very problems under the relentless desert sun. Their legacy is a powerful reminder that true innovation is often born from constraint, that the most profound leaps forward come from the need to adapt and survive. By recognizing these deep connections, we gain not only a greater appreciation for the past, but also a wellspring of inspiration for building a more resilient and ingenious future, using the timeless wisdom of the desert as our guide. For far too long, the grand narratives of history have been overwhelmingly male, echoing the voices of kings, generals, and merchants, while the contributions of women have been whispered, if heard at all. But when we brush the sand away from the artifacts and truly read the inscriptions, a different, far richer story emerges, one where women were not merely passive observers but active, powerful architects of desert civilizations. The evidence, often overlooked in favor of more obvious symbols of power like swords and scepters, reveals a tapestry of female influence woven into the very fabric of trade, religion, and governance. This isn't about rewriting history to fit a modern agenda. It's about finally reading the full text that has been there all along, waiting for us to look past our own biases and see the complete picture of human achievement. Consider the formidable figure of Queen Amenishakito of Kush. Here was a ruler who commanded not just respect but outright fear and admiration. The archaeological record leaves little room for doubt about her power. Her pyramid at Mara is one of the largest and most impressive in the royal cemetery, a statement in stone that she was a sovereign of immense importance. But it's the artifacts from her tomb that truly tell the story. She amassed a breathtaking collection of jewelry, including dozens of ornate signet rings and heavy golden bracelets, but these were far more than mere adornments. In the ancient world, a signet ring was a tool of statecraft. It was used to seal official documents and decrees, making her personal signature the final authority of the kingdom. Perhaps most tellingly, reliefs depict her in the classic pharaonic pose of smiting her enemies, a powerful artistic convention previously reserved almost exclusively for male rulers. This imagery was a deliberate and calculated projection of power, communicating to her subjects and rivals alike that she possessed the same divine right and military authority as any king. She wasn't just a placeholder, she was the undisputed leader, likely commanding armies and directing the complex machinery of the Kushite state. Yet the influence of women wasn't confined to the throne. Out on the bustling, multicultural Silk Road, women were the engine of everyday economy and social exchange. While we might picture caravans led by men, the reality within the Oasis cities was far more nuanced. Legal documents recovered from sites like Nia, written on wooden tablets in the Kharosthi script, show women actively engaged in commerce. These texts record women buying and selling property, lending and borrowing money, and even acting as legal guardians. They owned vineyards, managed orchards, and ran workshops. In a world of long-distance trade where men could be away for years on a caravan, women were often the ones holding down the fort, managing the family's assets, making business decisions, and ensuring economic stability back home. Their role was absolutely critical to the success of the entire Silk Road network, providing the stable, productive home bases that made the long, dangerous journeys worthwhile. This economic power often translated into social and cultural influence. The incredible preservation in the Tarim Basin deserts has given us a uniquely personal window into their lives through their fashion. The graves of women reveal a stunning array of textiles, elaborately woven woolen cloaks, finely made silk tunics, and felted wool hats. Their wardrobes were a map of the world, incorporating styles and materials from China, Central Asia, and the Mediterranean. A woman's choice of clothing was a personal statement of identity and status within a mixed community. Furthermore, the grave goods buried with them tell a story of belief and family. They were often interred with small, personal looms, spindles, and baskets of food for the afterlife, items that speak to their valued role as producers and nurturers. They were buried with their children, highlighting their central place in the family unit. These weren't anonymous figures. They were mothers, artisans, and businesswomen whose passing was honored with care and respect. Unearthing these stories requires a deliberate shift in how we interpret the past. For decades, archaeology was often focused on finding palaces, temples, and objects of obvious wealth and power, a focus that naturally skewed towards male accomplishments. But a newer, more inclusive approach is looking at the entire social landscape. It involves meticulously analyzing burial sites not just for their golden treasures, but for the placement of the body, the pollen residues that might indicate offerings of flowers, and the wear patterns on tools that tell us how they were used in daily life. It means reading between the lines of ancient texts to find the women who were there all along, like the priestesses who managed temple economies or the female scribes whose handwriting we are only now beginning to recognize. By asking different questions of the evidence, we are finding a past that is far more complex, interesting, and human. It's a past where power had many faces, and where the silent, patient work of women in the home, the market, and the temple was just as vital to the survival and flourishing of these hidden dynasties as the deeds of any king celebrated in stone. High above the sun-baked stones of Petra and the silent great houses of Choco Canyon, another world entirely captivated the minds of ancient desert dwellers, the boundless, glittering dome of the night sky. Freed from the haze and light pollution that obscures our modern view, the desert offered a front-row seat to the cosmos, presenting a celestial spectacle of breathtaking clarity. For these cultures, the stars were far more than just beautiful lights. They were a vital, functional tool, a divine clock, and a sacred map, all rolled into one. This intimate relationship with the heavens wasn't a leisurely hobby. It was a matter of survival, a sophisticated science born from the necessity of navigating both the physical and spiritual landscapes of their harsh, beautiful world. The practical demands of desert life made astronomers of entire civilizations. For the Nabatean traders whose caravans crisscrossed the Arabian deserts, the stars were an essential GPS. Navigating featureless seas of sand by day was treacherous, but the cool night offered a safer and more reliable path. They would have memorized the slow wheel of the constellations, using the fixed point of the North Star to maintain their direction on journeys that could last for months. A shift in the position of a familiar star group could signal the change of seasons, telling them when to expect the brief, crucial rains or when to avoid certain routes due to extreme heat. This knowledge was a closely guarded trade secret, a form of intellectual capital as valuable as the frankincense and silks they carried, ensuring their wealth and their safe return home. This celestial wisdom was literally carved into their architecture, turning entire cities into massive stone calendars and observatories. In the heart of Nabatean Petra, certain tombs and facades are precisely aligned with the movements of the sun. On the equinoxes, a beam of light can be seen to strike specific, carved niches with dramatic accuracy, a public display of their priests' understanding of the solar cycle. Far across the world, in the arid mesas of the American Southwest, the ancestral pueblones of Choco Canyon engineered their society around the sky. The Great Wall of the canyon's Fajoda butte features a famous petroglyph known as the Sun Dagger. Here, 3 large stone slabs are positioned so that shafts of sunlight, like moving daggers, pierce a spiral carving behind them, marking the summer and winter solstices and the equinoxes with pinpoint precision. This wasn't just a clever trick, it was the community's agricultural planner signaling the exact times to plant and to harvest, dictating the rhythm of life for everyone in the canyon. Beyond the practical, the cosmos was deeply woven into their spiritual and cultural identity. The desert's vast, silent emptiness seems to naturally invite contemplation of the infinite, and ancient peoples saw the hand of their gods in the orderly, predictable dance of the planets and stars. The movements of Venus or the phases of the moon were not random events but messages, omens, and markers for religious ceremonies. Building a temple aligned to the rising sun on the solstice was an act of worship, a way to harness the power of the heavens and bring it into the human realm. It was a way to demonstrate that their rulers and priests possessed the knowledge to commune with the divine order itself, legitimizing their authority and unifying their people under a common, celestial belief system. This ancient legacy of looking up is a powerful bridge connecting us to our ancestors. Their meticulous observations form the very bedrock of modern astronomy. The names of constellations we use today, the understanding of the solar year, and the basic concepts of timekeeping all have roots in these early desert observations. Their work shows us that the drive to understand our place in the universe is a fundamental and timeless human trait, a shared curiosity that transcends millennia. The next time you gaze up at a clear night sky, remember that you are participating in a tradition that stretches back to the very first desert trader who looked to the stars for direction, or the first farmer who used the moon to decide when to sow the seeds. That sense of wonder you feel is their enduring gift, a spark of cosmic connection that has never faded. Our journey through these hidden dynasties beneath the sand has revealed something far greater than a collection of forgotten ruins. It has unveiled a profound tapestry of human ingenuity, adaptation, and resilience that stretches across continents and millennia. From the bustling Silk Road metropolises swallowed by the Taklamakan to the ingenious Garamantes who mastered the Sahara, each civilization we've explored offers a powerful lesson in the delicate, often precarious balance between human society and the natural environment. These were not people who simply endured their world. They were visionaries who reshaped it, who turned barren wastelands into cradles of culture and innovation through sheer force of will and intellect. Their stories, patiently unearthed by the painstaking work of archaeologists and the dazzling power of modern technology, remind us that history is not merely a record of grand monuments and powerful rulers. It is, more importantly, the story of everyday people, farmers, merchants, artisans, and mothers who built communities, raised families, and forged meaning against incredible odds, leaving behind whispers of their lives in the objects they touched and the homes they cherished. As we stand today facing our own era of unprecedented environmental challenges, from climate change to water scarcity, the lessons echoing from these sandy tombs feel less like ancient history and more like urgent, relevant wisdom. The fall of these empires was rarely a simple story of a single catastrophe. It was most often a slow unraveling, a combination of climatic shifts and human choices that gradually strained their ingenious systems beyond the breaking point. The Garamantes mined fossil water until their aquifers ran dry. The Indus Valley cities saw their life-giving rivers vanish due to changes in monsoon patterns. The ancestral Pueblones faced a mega-drought after generations of growth had stressed their local environment. Their experiences serve as powerful cautionary tales, illustrating that no amount of technological brilliance can make a society entirely immune to the limits of the natural world upon which it depends. They teach us that resilience is not about dominating our environment, but about listening to it, adapting to it, and living within its means with foresight and humility. But their legacy is not one of failure, it is a beacon of inspiration. It challenges us to carry their wisdom forward, to look to the past not for nostalgia, but for innovative solutions to our modern problems. The revival of ancient Qanat systems for sustainable irrigation, the study of Nabatean water capture for modern conservation, and the respect for indigenous knowledge that we see in collaborative archaeology, all of these are ways we are heeding the call from the past. Exploring these sands of time is more than an academic pursuit. It is a deeply human one, connecting us to the long, unbroken chain of invention and community that defines our species. It asks us to consider our own role in this ongoing story, to be not just observers of history but active participants in preserving the future. We are the ancestors of tomorrow, and the choices we make now will determine what stories are left for future generations to uncover. Thank you for joining this exploration into the heart of history's greatest mysteries. We would love to hear which lost civilization captivated you the most. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe for more adventures into the forgotten corners of our past.